Hello, and welcome to Mapping Out High School. I'm Deshelle McVeigh, and I'm going to share a few practical strategies for planning high school with confidence. And I promise it won't be that scary. So, today we're going to walk through these strategies to help you create a flexible, engaging high school experience that works not only for for your team, but also for you as the parent. So, we'll start with an introduction, just a second, and then we're going to talk about creating a high school plan without stressing out. Then we're going to talk about three key questions to ask before you choose your curriculum. Then balancing course subjects with electives and passions, making room for change. Remember, high school plans are going to have to be flexible. And lastly, keeping high school simple and sustainable. So, hi, I'm Deshelle. I am the owner and writer at Hide the Chocolate, which is a blog where I share about our relaxed Charlotte Mason homeschool. I'm also the owner and publisher of Literary Adventures for Kids, where we help students to dig deeper into great literature through rabbit trails and hands on connections to the book. And that's where you'll find me most days because our language arts curriculum is now all the way from pre K through high school. We even have a phonics curriculum. So it's a full language arts curriculum. I'm also the mom of three, one in college. She's about to be a junior, one in high school, also a junior, one a semi responsible adult. So he has an actual paying job and a dog. So he's almost a full fledged responsible citizen. I'm also a former traditional high school teacher and guidance counselor. And now I spend most of my days teaching in person in our local homeschool co op and on Zoom, where I spend a lot of time teaching literature to kids at poetry tea times and book clubs. I am a book addict, as you may have guessed, by owning a literature curriculum company. And I'm a bit of a chocolate junkie because who else would name their blog Hide the Chocolate? I mean, I won't even tell you about the Nutella sitting on the desk right now. Okay, so let's start out with creating a high school plan without stressing out. So, number one, let's look at number one. We'll start here. You do not have to figure out all 4 years today. So, we're not going to plan all 4 years today. I promise you're going to get to all 4 years and it's going to be this grand plan and you're going to see it all come together, but really don't stress out about it all right now. I know some planning guides make it look like you need to map out every semester from now until graduation, but trust me, that's just honestly a fast way to stress yourself out. Instead, I think of it more like keep the 4 years of high school as the big picture with a somewhat general outline, and then put your focus on this year, what you really need to accomplish this year. So that brings us to number two. Start with what's needed for this year. So, what does your teen need right now? What are your state's requirements? Are there prerequisites to other courses that they need to be taking? So, like, are they need to take an algebra one so they can move on to an algebra two, or do they need algebra before they can get to chemistry? That type of thing. Um, are there courses that may take multiple years? So you may be looking at a history class that takes various years, like a world history that maybe is more than 1 year, a couple years, even 3 years. And are there some courses that you might work better together? So in that, I think of like I said a literature curriculum company, but that's because I used the literature curriculum in my homeschool, and so I created it. And one of the fun things I did was I like to put our history and our literature together. So if we're going to be doing British Lit, we're learning British history. If we're going to be doing World Lit, we're learning World history. American Lit, American history. You get the point. So we have these ways of putting things together, these courses together that make things a little bit easier in the planning stage. So if there's something that you wanted to study now, like American history, then maybe you put your American Lit in there together. Okay, number three, let's separate out what's the essential things that we need from the things that will be great if we had them, but if we don't get to them, we'll still be okay. So the essential things or the must do things are the state requirements. So you have requirements of that your state's going to require, your umbrella is going to require. Your child may be going to college, so they need certain classes that they need to take before they enter college, or they may be going to some type of vocational school, and they need certain courses there. So have kind of a checklist of all the requirements that you can check off as they're completed. Like I said, we're not going to plan all 4 years. We're going to have a general map of what we want to do, but we want to kind of have this little list of everything that's required. So I have a little list on my transcript that it's to the side. It doesn't print out, but it's just to the side where I have like, okay, I need this, this, and this. And I'll check it off as we go. And this is not really a unit like a study. This is what we're going to do every year because that kind of is flexible and changing. Like, for example, in our school system, probably the best way to work through our umbrella would be to do physical science, then move on to biology, then move on to chemistry, then move on to whatever. My daughter did biology first, and it wasn't because of anything spectacular. It was just that her friends were doing biology, so she wanted to do it with them, and so we kind of tweaked that around. If you can be flexible with that, then that helps. So have your requirements kind of on a little checklist so you can check them off and okay, I've got that completed. It may not have been in the order that whatever checklist that I needed to, but it's done. So that way you'll have room for your interest led courses. And these are courses that are not necessarily required. They can be counted as an elective, but these are things that your kids want to do. So this is something they're interested in doing. For example, my daughter who's in college right now, she's pre-med and she was a huge science person. So we had to have, I believe, 3 sciences. She had to have biology, physical science, and chemistry. Um, were required by the state and by our umbrella. However, she took 7 different sciences because she wanted to. She wanted to learn about forensic science. She wanted to learn about anatomy, all these things. So she took different classes. And though those were not required, those are something interest led that she was able to do because we knew we had our requirements in. And by the way, that same kid hates math. So we did the basic, the bottom line of what we had to do for math. So she filled up the rest with this science interest that she had. And fourth, we want to focus on building a flexible framework. We're not just following a rigid checklist. Remember, planning high school is not about perfection. It's about building something that fits your family and your teen. So we don't want to say, "Oh, this is the plan we've got and it can never change." No, that's not going to happen. We're going to be changing our plan. I guarantee that throughout the 4 years. Okay, so next are some key questions to ask before choosing your curriculum. So just take a moment, and this is a thing that you want to sit down, maybe with your teen, maybe with your spouse, and discuss this. So, first of all, what is your teen's learning style? Okay. There are different styles of learning, and I've talked about this in other conferences, but there's, the person who works kinetically and they need to be touching and moving and things and they work better if they see things done. And there's different students who, like, maybe for example, I have a student who is ADHD, so the way she learns is very different. She has to stay very focused for short periods of time, while I have another one who loves to just sit and do all her work at one time, and if that's like 3 or 4 hours at a big thing, then that's how she works. So all of my kids work a different way because they have different styles of learning. So your kids may be the exact same way. So how do they learn best? And do they work well independently, or are they going to need more support from you? So a lot of my courses that my kids end up working with, they do independently by the time they get to high school. But there are a couple of courses that they can't. Like I said, my kids don't necessarily like math. I don't know what I did wrong there. So they don't do well independently with math. That is something that I really need to be working with them, or I need to get another teacher to be working with them. So would your kid work well independently, or do they need to have a little bit of hand holding? And this is also, as we talked about, like I have an ADHD child. And that child needs to be reminded a lot more frequently. And it's not necessarily nagging, whereas it would be to one student, it would be nagging to her. It would be more of a help to remind her, oh, yeah, yeah, I got distracted. And I can understand that because I have ADHD. So I can totally relate to that whole scenario. Okay, next is what is your role as the parent? So I like to say that you are in the role of facilitator. You're not necessarily lecturing your kids each day. You're not sitting down and like you did in elementary school and reading the science book or whatever and walking through the experiments, hand holding them. They're a lot of times going to be doing a lot of things in a very independent way. So you're more of a facilitator, helping them find the right curriculum. You're going to talk to them, you're going to see, hey, do we like this curriculum? Is this something that's going to work well for us? This is not something where you're picking everything and you're going through it. Okay. This is something where we want to work with our student in this role. And so that's why I come to the last one, which is, does your teen have input in their learning? I think this is really important. If you give your teen a voice in this process, even if it's just like you've narrowed it down to 3 or 4 different options for this curriculum, this is going to make a huge difference because this is going to influence their motivation. Because remember, you're not getting an education right now, they are. So this is something that they need to be invested in. And you're not looking for this perfect curriculum, you're looking for something that fits and it fits them and you. So, can you both work with it? And if you can't, then ditch it. But if you can, and maybe you just need a few adjustments, then that's the best case scenario. Okay. Next, we're going to talk about balancing our core subjects with our electives and our passions. So you have what I call the core requireds. These are like your language arts, your math, and science. And these are going to be everywhere, every umbrella, every state, every province, every everything, wherever you're from. You're going to have these basic cores that are required. And then you have what I would call the non-core required. So these are things that might be different depending on where you live or where your umbrella. For example, in my state, it is required that every student take a personal finance class in high school. That's not every state, but that is a requirement. Economics being a requirement. These are not core classes. A lot of our history and social studies aren't necessarily core classes, but they are required. So those are why you want to look at this list and really write down everything that's required because you're going to have those core that you know off the top of your head. Oh yeah, everybody's got to do math, right? Everybody's got to do science. Everybody's got to learn how to speak English and write. But you're going to have these other things that you might forget about. And I promise you, you will forget about them if you don't write them down. We put off my son's economics until his last semester of high school. Really wish we hadn't done that in hindsight. But it was one of those things that it kind of got thrown out because it was a one semester class and kind of forgot about it till the very end. So you want to make sure you look at those requirements that are not your core classes. And remember, these core classes don't have to be dry and boring. So you can have fun with them. Like you could do like, okay, we're going to do language arts. We're going to do dystopian literature. So this year, my company, we do a year of different types of things that we work with, like modern lit this year. Well, world lit, American lit, British lit. And this year was modern lit. And I kind of laughed because I didn't mean to, but we had like 3 dystopian novels in a row and we almost made it dystopian lit because a lot of modern lit is that. But if your kid's really into that, if they're into the Hunger Games, they're into Unwind, those type of books, then grab those and make a dystopian literature. Unless you've got a requirement there, go for it. Have fun with it. If your kid's into science, like I said, mine was, maybe they want to study the environment. So they learn about environmental issues and how we affect the environment. That could be a great one. Or maybe if it's an election year or something along those lines, you could pull in your government through current events. So all these things are different ways you can make the core classes more fun. I mentioned my daughter did biology first, and so now as a junior, she's taking the freshman science, which is physical science. And I knew she was not going to be happy taking that as a junior. She's like, oh, mom, I'm like the oldest kid in this class because I don't teach science. Sorry. I farm that out every time. But she's taking, and I can't remember the name of it, but it's like Marvel science. So it literally has to do with the Marvel characters just because I thought it'd be fun. Our very first course that we ever created for high school was called Poetry in a Movie. And it was literally because We wanted to teach our kids poetry, classical poetry, with all the literary elements, but we wanted to make it fun for them. So we threw in movies. So we would find poems that were in movies and had a significant part of the movie. And we throw that in so that at the end of the month, after they'd studied this poet and this poem and the literary elements and all these things, then they got to watch a movie. So we get to have fun with the movie. So, you can have fun with that. But remember, there's also room for electives, and this can be where your teen really shines. So, some electives that I think of are fairly common are things like Bible is one of our electives here. Actually, we're umbrellaed under a Christian school, so that's actually required. But in most places, that would be an elective. But anything that gets their interest, like art or cooking or maybe animal science, you could look job related. Maybe they could volunteer or work at a veterinarian office, and that counts as an elective. Different things like that that can become part of their high school plan. And that's a completely legitimate thing. A lot of people tell me, "Oh, no, no, their job can't count." But it actually can. My mom worked for many years. She retired from the state school system and she taught marketing. And a big part of that was she taught job co ops and she would get the kids jobs at different places and they would work at the job, but they would also, report back to her. She would talk to their bosses, kind of keep tabs on them. And this became a co-op related, they would get hours credit for it because they were learning job related skills. And then finally, we have combinations. So this is one of my favorite tricks. I love to combining things. Like I said, language arts history is probably my favorite, but you can do things like language arts and science, fine arts and history. How about history of medicine? My daughter did that one year. Another daughter did history of medieval art. Now I won't, I will not say that that was her favorite class. She was like, "Oh, that was awful, Mom." I said, "Well, you chose medieval art. It seemed a little out there." But look at that because you can combine things, especially like I said, when you're doing like things like American Lit and American history, putting those together because your kids are reading so much in literature and they're going to read so much in history that they end up getting bogged down reading so much. So if you can kind of put those together, it kind of eliminates that so much reading involved. Okay. Next, I want to say you need to be flexible. So make some room for detours. If there's one thing that I want you to hear in this session, it's this: plans can change. So make room for a few of these detours along the way. It's okay to change your curriculum mid-year if it's not working. I'm telling you, it's okay. I have done it more than once. I have thrown out a curriculum that we had been working on for months because it just was not working. She was not getting it. He was not getting it. We did not feel like it was going to work for them. And that's okay. Yeah, you're going to eat that cost and that's no fun, but it's okay to move on. Also, your teen's going to grow. When they start this process, they're like 13 years old, 14 years old. By the time they're done with this process, they're 18. Their interests are going to shift. When they're starting high school, they're probably still thinking, I want to own I always want one of my kids said, an ice cream truck, which I thought was hilarious. Or I want to be a vet. And then by the time they get into junior and senior, you're like, oh, no, I don't want to do that at all. I want to do something totally different. So their interests are going to shift. And sometimes that means that the curriculum you thought you had all figured out or the plan you thought you had all figured out is a disaster and it's not going to work. Okay. And that's fine. Just shift the plan. As long as we're getting our requireds in, even if those requireds, we're going to tweak them a little bit to make them a little more interesting to our kid. That's fine. Next, build in some buffer time. So every year won't be perfectly linear. You know this, you're homeschoolers. If you've homeschooled for a hot minute, you know that things happen. There's sicknesses, there's unexpected changes. There's so many things could come in and just wreck your day, wreck your week, wreck your month. I didn't plan on my dad getting cancer. I didn't plan on spending a solid year of my life going back and forth to his house, spending most of my days at his house, my kids not with me a lot of that time. I didn't plan on that. And that year, when looking back, I would think, oh, on paper, it was a wreck. It wasn't. We didn't get behind. We were still okay. But I had to let go of the idea of what the plan was when I started that school year. So I'm giving you permission. You can pivot when you need to. You're not behind. Give yourself that permission to pivot. You're adjusting. Do it without guilt. Um, and you know what? Nobody says that you can't do things in a weird schedule. It doesn't have to follow the school schedule that's your traditional school system. Many times we've gone into June, finishing off a class, or started in June, another class. This, for example, this last year, my daughter needed geometry. She was going to take the ACT. Geometry is a big part of that. She had not done that. She'd done a lot of algebra, but no geometry. And so we started geometry, I believe, like the end of May of one year, just so she could get as much as possible in before she took that first ACT test, that I think was in October. I knew I couldn't get a whole year of geometry in, but maybe I could get a huge chunk of it in. So she had a really weird timing for the geometry, and that was okay. My state allowed me to do that. They don't say you have to do this at certain days. They just say you have to have so many days in, so many hours in. So it's okay to make those changes. Remember, homeschooling allows for grace and course correction. Give yourself some grace. Give your teen some grace. It's okay. Okay. Keep high school simple and sustainable. So I'm sure you've heard the KISS, which is keep it simple, stupid, I think is what I learned in business. But we're not going to say that. We're going to say we're going to keep high school simple and sustainable. So this is the part where we keep it real. First off, we want less stress, right? We don't want to freak out because our kids are in high school, because I don't know how many times people said, oh, but in high school, you're going to put them back in school, traditional school, right? No, we're not going to do that. Remember, you don't need every subject every year. So spread them out. It's okay. Unless you have some type of requirement, which in the state of Tennessee, which is where I live, we do have a math requirement that literally says they have to have a math every year for 4 years. Not 4 maths, but math every year, which is slightly different. So instead of me saying, oh, they could take, like, say, algebra 2 and geometry at the same time, in one year, they can't do that. So they would have to spread those out. But you can stagger subjects. You can do no history this year. That's perfectly fine. No science this year. If you don't need it, then don't do it. Like I said, I have one daughter who took 7 sciences. I got one daughter who's going to take 3, and she would be done, and she would never take another science because she hates it. And that's perfectly fine. Another thing I see that causes a lot of stress, not just for you, the parent, but also for the kids, is overscheduling. So you think in your brain, oh, I went to school and I had 6 subjects, or I had 7 subjects a day, whatever you had. I had 7, I'm pretty sure, because we had 7 o'clock classes back then. And you're like, okay, so they need a subject for every, hour. They need six subjects, 7 subjects, whatever. What happens is we start adding all these things because we're following some traditional school system idea, and we start overscheduling. So really do out the math on it. Let's say my kid's going to have algebra, they're going to have science, they're going to have history, whatever. Let's say they're doing a regular 45-minute day. Okay, so I pull that out. That's a 45-minute schedule, sorry, for per class. So that's 45 minutes. If they only took 45 minutes for each class, this will be a 6-7 hour day. Okay, that's fine for a high school student. However, I need to look at that. So maybe she breezes through her history. She gets that done in 20 minutes. It's easy peasy. But maybe math is harder, and maybe math is taking her every day an hour and a half to 2 hours. I need to think that through. Think logically about it. Because if I'm just saying that everything is 45 minutes and or an hour, and this is how we fill out our day, and that's not how it's really playing out, we got a problem. So look at that. Think about if she's needing extra help because this is an extremely hard class, or he's needing extra help because it's an extremely hard class. Maybe it's physics or something there. Maybe we don't pile in 6 or 7 subjects. Maybe that semester we're cool with just 4 subjects, something like that. Next is keeping simple records. So record keeping doesn't have to be fancy. Really doesn't. Unless your state is requiring some massive thing, or your umbrella is requiring some massive thing. It's really, you can just keep a simple spreadsheet, a checklist. There are plenty of transcript templates out there in the world. You can email me at Deshelle McVeigh. Excuse me, that's not my email address. Don't do me the email me there. Deshelle at hidethechocolate.com. I can send you the one I use that I just made up for my kids. You can change the names and dates and stuff on it, but just keep it simple, just so you have a record. It doesn't have to be fancy. Um, Third is creative grading. It doesn't have to be a test. So a lot of times we test, and that's, for things like math, a lot of times that's what we need. But think outside the box on things that might be a little more fun for your student and easier for you. Like projects, they're doing science. Maybe they're doing a lab. You're getting them to explain to you how this works. They understand that science project because they're walking you through it. Presentations. They need to learn to be able to stand up in front of people and talk. If there's anything I can tell you, that is one from all of the years of teaching school. Kids need to be able to talk to people. And so they need to be able to say, this is what I'm thinking, and here's my thought process behind it. So have them present to you something. And then sometimes it might just be they complete some particular task. They've completed reading this and reading that. We may talk about it. We may have a discussion. For example, you may be doing a literature class and, hey, I want you to read this book. Say we're going to read Animal Farm, and then we're going to talk about it afterwards. I've read the book, so I know what to ask you. I know questions. But if you don't, just say, hey, what did you think about the book? Who were your favorite characters? What do you think that the author was thinking when they wrote this? Just different types of narration or discussion. My daughter, for history, she writes a journal. So she's every day writing in her journal about what happened at that particular point in history. She's also watching current events and journaling that as well. So these are all sorts of ways that you can do grading that doesn't have to be a simple a test that you have to come up with all the time. And bonus, our goal is mastery, not busy work, okay? You're not replicating a public school. You're building something that works for your family and your sanity, okay? So we want to get the kids to understand what they're doing. We want them to master the topic. And sometimes that means that we have to do 20 or 30 algebra problems. And sometimes that means we get it pretty quickly, and 5 or 10 shows me, hey, we got it. Don't just keep adding things in there just so they can show you and you have a record of it. We want them to get them to mastery, and we don't want them to get used to being like, oh, I hate this because it's a lot of busy work. That's kind of what I think about reading comprehension tests. They always seem to be like that, just this exhausting thing of doesn't really find out if your kid really is comprehending the book they're reading. It's just a stupid test that this person thought would mean they read the book. And it doesn't necessarily mean anything at all, as we all know. Okay. Lastly, you got this. Really, I'm not kidding. You got this. So here's your permission slip to keep it simple. First, start where you are. If your kid is a junior, then that's okay. We go through and we look at our requirements. We see where we're at. What have they got completed? What do they have left? Yeah, we got a shorter timeline to fill in all the requirements, but that's okay. We get our little set and we look, and then we can sort that out. If your kid is in 7th or 8th grade and you're planning ahead, okay, you know where. Maybe in 8th grade, they take a class that's in high school. Depending on your umbrellas and things, that can definitely work. My kids have all taken high school classes in middle school, mainly because it went with what we were doing. It went with the flow. We may have had a 2-year Algebra 1 class instead of a 1-year Algebra 1 class because I really wanted to grasp Algebra 1. Or maybe we took a government class that was a high school class, and we spread it out over a year in middle school, and we let that be a semester's credit because that's how it worked in high school, but it was a year in middle school, and that's fine. Secondly, adjust when you need to. So if you see something that's not working, or you see your kids melting down, or they're struggling, make adjustments. I can't tell you how many times I've thrown out a curriculum because it just wasn't working. And honestly, half the time it worked with the other kid and it just didn't work with this kid. So yeah, so much for buying that curriculum to use over and over, right? And lastly, I want to say, enjoy the journey. Obviously, you might need some chocolate along the way, but homeschooling high school can be absolutely amazing. These people are growing up and they're getting these great personalities and they're becoming adults. And it's just honestly a wonderful thing to see. But it's not going to be perfect. And that's okay. You can do this. You're going to do a great job, and chocolate absolutely helps. So I want to thank you for joining me today. If you want more support, inspiration, or a little enchantment in your homeschool, come over and visit me at Literary Adventures for Kids. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me at hidethechocolate.com. Like I mentioned earlier, literaryaadventuresforkids.com. You can find me on Facebook at Hide the Chocolate Literary Adventures for Kids. Instagram is Hide the Chocolate Blog and Literary Adventures for Kids. And on TikTok, Hide the Chocolate. But I promise you, I'm not on social media a whole lot. I will check in, but the best way to get a hold of me is to email me at Deshelle at hidethechocolate.com. And I also wanted to give you some options to see how I do things. So here's a free course. Go to literaryaadventuresforkids.com/p/free-courses, or you can scan right there. And we'll go in there, and there's all these different courses. We have a free literature course called The Wild for high school, and we have a free psychology course, which is just one I made up for my daughter. And I was like, hey, I don't sell psychology courses, so we'll give them away. I also have a few Bible ones too that I made up for my daughter, and I don't sell Bible related courses, so I'm giving those away as well. So you can find those in there and use those. But basically, what I want you to do is see what I'm doing and how you can do it. You can replicate that for yourselves. Also, I invite you to check out the Society for Literary Adventures. That is our language arts membership for high school. And we have everything you can need for, well, actually 6 years of high school if you want to do that, because we have several different year-long things. But you can basically make your own high school literature curriculum by letting your kids go in there and picking what courses they want to do, because it's all based on one book. So every month is based on a different book. So they just pick a book, and that's your month of language arts. I also teach them in the live book clubs too, in the live poetry tea time. So I'll teach them a lot of poetry and writing and that kind of fun stuff. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this and got a lot from it. And again, feel free to message me, email me, or if you go to my website, you'll see at the bottom it says confused, have questions. You can click on that and you can book a Zoom call with me for 10 minutes, and I'll answer any questions I can. Thanks for joining me.